Hello, everybody. I am so happy that you guys are joining us for yet another episode of just, me and my crazy friends that are having a good time, just talking to each other and talking to you guys. I'm very excited. So, we're going to be talking about man and machine, digital transformation in the 150 years of JHU. I am so excited to be here. The whole team is excited to be here. So, we're gonna get to it. So I'll introduce myself a little bit. So again, I'm Charles Johnson-Bey, engineering class of '89. I spent my career doing stuff like taking things from ideas to implementation. I was inducted into National Academy of Engineering. And something we're going to talk about a little bit tonight, and I will say this, is that I am in Senegal. I am in Dakar, Senegal. And you talk about man and machine. We're using this machine to work. If it's a blip, you know why, but I think we're going to be okay. So I'm going to start now and I'm going to introduce folks on my good friends on the panel. So we've got Captain Bill Kirst, Arts and Sciences of 2000. He's an experienced, sought after change management expert, JHU alumni council member, podcast host, and veteran. Bill has worked across a breadth of industries and currently works at Adobe. Actually, I'm looking. I see you, Alex. How you doing? I think hopefully you guys have seen Bill first, but it's okay.
I can see Bill.
Okay, good. So we're gonna keep going. Next, we have my good friend Kate Sperber. Kate is Arts and Sciences class of '95. She helps organizations transform interesting ideas into viable businesses. She drives sustainable revenue and customer growth by creating digital products that make a difference in daily life. Kate is known for uniting ideas and people to bring the right solutions to the market. I feel like I'm in a 1960s commercial, right? But it's great. So, and then we've got next my friend Alex Sharpe, engineer in '95. He's an academic and longtime governance, digital transformation, and privacy expert with real world operational experience. Not imaginary world, real world imagination, operational experience. He has run business units, influenced national policy, and is recognized as a world expert in AI. So we are very lucky to have him. And last but not least, the person who brought us all together, honestly, the first time, this is all F's idea. We've got my friend Efrem Epstein, the Arts and Sciences class of '90. He is currently the VP of Communication at Throughways. Efrem has spent the last 3 decades as marketing communications professional, including serving in the digital transformation space. So we've got the goods, we've got the topic. So get your popcorn because we're going to have fun, right? And I always like to say what this is, it's a conversation amongst us, and we actually do talk about stuff like this all the time. And we're just sharing it with you guys, to be honest. Like this is who we are, and we have a lot of fun. So, so we're going to do a little bit level setting right now, just to say what we're going to talk about. We were actually purposeful about the name. Like we didn't want to do man versus machine. We wanted to do man and machine. And we also wanted to, with the 150th anniversary of Johns Hopkins, which is this sesquicentennial. I'm going to say that again. Sesquicentennial. Somebody needs to ring a bell, give the angel its wings, because that is an SAT word and but means 150th. I didn't know that. Had to look that up. But that's what we're celebrating this year because the university was founded in 1876, and from its early days, it's been defined by just pioneering research. We're going to talk about that today. It's had that spirit, the extraordinary people, like the people. It's real, it's never about the buildings, it's about the people. And so when you look at the folks that are on this call, and we're all friends. We have the Hopkins alumnus, like we've all are alums, but quite honestly, we're just good people. And we've had, and good people that you've gone to school with at Hopkins. That's what I like about Hopkins. It's a great place. So Hopkins has been about, delivering world-changing impact and has always been deeply connected to Baltimore. I'm a East Baltimore guy, so that is very important to me. So first thing I'm gonna do is call in my friend Kate. help me also set this stage before we get into the question. So, Kate, come on
Yeah.
in. How you doing?
It's so great to see you guys again recently. As CJ mentioned, this isn't really about man versus machine, although that was the topic that we first started talking about, and then we started devolving, if you will, into well, it actually kind of seems like machines might be winning, so maybe it really is more machine versus man. And then as we start talking more, um, well, and let me go back for a second, because of course we have to mention a few things with AI. Examples of an AI model trying to blackmail an engineer about having an affair that didn't learn about from a direct chat, but learned about from an email thread. There's lying, cheating, stealing, all kinds of stuff that's been making the news. And so we're like, is it machine versus man? But then what we landed on is no, it really is man and machine, that together we're better. And so that's really the topic of this conversation today is how do we harness the good and how do we keep doing more of what's working? How do we think about things that maybe aren't going so well? And then really, what's the role of Hopkins in both developing AI and emerging technologies? And then what's the future that Hopkins plays in this as well? That's the intro.
All right. Well, thanks. All right, guys. Hope you're ready because here we go. And the good thing is we are on time. Actually, we're ahead of time, so that just gives us more time to talk about stuff. So great job. So we're gonna start off, and Bill, I'm gonna bring you up first. And so one of the things that we spent some time talking about is, like sort of past figures, sort of historical figures, with a Hopkins connection, potentially, but sort of what are some of what's the role like in digital transformation and all that? What are some of the past figures and what do you think they would feel about where we are today and what's going on?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think when we have the opportunity to reflect back on 150 years at Hopkins, and I encourage people to visit 150.jhu.edu. That is a website that is set up that you can take a look at all of the history that Hopkins has influenced and touched in people's lives. I think again, we talk about digital transformation, but Charles and the panel here, I think we talked a lot about the opportunity to even create technology, to bring minds together, to bring talent together. And so for me, I go all the way back to the beginning of the university with Mary Elizabeth Garrett and donating that money that allowed the university to be founded and gathered. If you look at some of the esteemed history from the very beginning days of Hopkins, it was really about gathering resources and gathering people to solve big problems. And today, we see that presented with technology, but across the history of Hopkins, you think about the medical advancements, you think about the technological advancements, you think about the philosophical, historical, there's a wide swath of people that have come through the walls of Hopkins, have crossed the lawns of Hopkins, have sat in the classrooms of Hopkins, and certainly built in the labs of Hopkins. And so when I think personally about the people of that started Hopkins, allowed it to start, I also fast forward to, for example, when I first joined in technology many years ago, I worked for a small company called IBM. Many of you probably know that company. I learned when I was at IBM that Sam Palmisano, who was the CEO of IBM at the time, was a Hopkins grad and also played and was an athlete and played on the sports teams. And so all of a sudden, my world became really, really small. Not only being a Hopkins grad, but someone who is directly connected to a CEO who is influencing technology around the world at his stead. So when I think about the many walks of life as a veteran, as an LGBT man, as a Hopkins alum, as someone who's traveled the world, I just think about when I talk to people and I say Johns Hopkins, every reaction is the same. They say, whoa. And then they give me a story about some advancement, be it the COVID dashboard or something that was created in the lab or the support that was given for HIV research in Africa. Every single one of these things has a person behind it. And so when I think about 150 and I think about transformation, digital or otherwise, to me, it always starts and ends with the people, the person. the person who decided to take on a big problem and solve it to leave the world better than they found it.
Wow. That's fantastic. I think that's right. It starts with the people. I was talking about when I was, coming in, that's the thing I was saying. It's not the buildings, it's the people. And when you get the right mix of people together, then good things happen, right? Magic can happen. So, Bill, I think that's an excellent point. So, Ephraim, you gotta follow our good friend Bill. So, what are your thoughts?
It's always tough to follow Bill. Um, One person I'm going to talk a little about is somebody that people might know the name Sylvester. Sylvester dorm is actually one of the oldest dorms at Hopkins. It's in AMR1, which I believe is the first dorm building ever at Hopkins, and it's one of the six dorms there. James Sylvester, which Sylvester dorm is named after, James Joseph Sylvester, he was an original Hopkins professor in 1876. And he was the founder of the American Journal of Mathematics. He invented a great number of mathematical terms. I don't think that he necessarily invented the word matrix or the word graph, but he basically was the first person to coin those terms in mathematical context. Um, he was born and largely educated in England. In 1841, he joined, this is still 30 years before Hopkins is founded, he joined the University of Virginia and believed to be the first Jewish professor at any American university ever. At the time that I came to Hopkins, Jewish students were fairly well represented, and Jewish faculty members were somewhat well represented, but that wasn't always the case. And in fact, in between University of Virginia and Hopkins, he almost went to Columbia, and he was turned down. And at that point, in that period, American universities were very xenophobic. And he was told something along the lines of, no, you weren't turned down because you're foreign. Trust me, if you were an American Jew, we would have rejected you as well. But he came to Hopkins. He was one of the original professors there, and he was one of the first people to basically do heavy research in mathematics at an American university. And he was a trailblazer. And then he brought a woman in. You can Google her, a woman named Christine Ladd Franklin, I believe, as a grad student, then became a professor at Hopkins as well. And a lot there in terms of advancing women's faculty and women's scholarship at a time when very few people were doing it. So that's somebody that I'm thinking about right now. And I'll pause there. More to say a little bit later.
Oh, fantastic. Great. That's such a historic fact that I'm glad you brought that up because I certainly didn't know. And, I've been involved with Hopkins for, oh Lord, since the 80s, right? And so that's a fantastic point. So thanks, F, for that. Alex, you're up. What are your thoughts?
W- oh my God, that that's a tough act to follow. So let me take a slightly different tact, right? If you look at the Hopkins alumni, we have at least 29 Nobel Prize winners. Yes, I counted. Wes Craven, famous author, former president of the NAACP, at least one U.S. president, Woodrow Wilson, and then I'm going to put a plug in. Now, I finished my master's in systems engineering in '95 at the Applied Physics Lab, which is now part of the system engineering program. My mentor was a guy by the name of Alex Kozyukov. They named the building after him. He is considered a thought leader and foundational in the whole area of system engineering. So pretty much every time you step on a plane or any highly complex system where you watch the space shuttle, you can thank Hopkins for pioneering in that field. And there's a very long list, and we'll get into it, but there's an incredibly long list of contributions. Um, so instead of naming, kind of walking through some individuals, I think those statistics are just kind of mind-numbing about the breadth and depth of the impact that, Hopkins alumni have had. And then we can also mention Michael Bloomberg. He went on to be very successful in the financial services community, went on to be the mayor of New York, and he's been a great philanthropist. So we have a nice group of alumni that I'm very proud to be part of. And I'm wearing the sweatshirt.
Yeah.
There you go. Nice one. Honestly, I don't think we can say enough nice things about Michael Bloomberg. I mean, he certainly has been a friend to Hopkins. I mean, a lot. I was actually in the audience when he gave his I think his first $100 million to the school. And it was crazy.
I can
Uh,
only imagine.
exactly. I was like, wait, he said $100 million, right? And he's given a lot more than that. But it's actually it's the impact of what he's given that's helped so many people at Hopkins and other places, not just Hopkins, but other places.
Then I
Again,
have to go there. Then I have to
go.
go there. Right. Going back 1776, a year that means a lot to us as Americans. There's like an anniversary or something coming up pretty soon, right? CJ, when you get a chance, you figured out what 150 years is. We have to figure out what the phrase is for 250.
There you
But
go.
a book was published by a Scotsman called The Wealth of Nations. Adam Smith, Foundation of Modern Economy, Economics. Alexander Hamilton used it to create the financial system in the US, which propagated through the world. But a foundational belief in that is that there is an obligation for folks that create wealth to, to contribute to the greater good in the form of philanthropy. And I think one of the things that when you look at Hopkins history, a lot of Hopkins alumni have done that. Just the founding of the university. We all
Mm,
benefit from that kind of philanthropic mindset. So, it's great you do all these great things and you accumulate this wealth and you can do a lot of stuff with it, including create a big pile of cash and burning it in the desert. It would be kind of insane, but you can. But instead, you think forward and you pay it back and you give back to a community that's been so good to you. It's one
yeah,
of the things I like about being part of Hopkins.
absolutely. And just to come back, it's called Semi-Quincentennial. It's 250th. It's
Semi-quincentennial.
there you go.
Wow.
Okay.
Sick.
That's another SAT word.
Mhm.
So, we'll be ready
Hey,
if that question's asked.
fortunately, I don't have to take an SAT ever again, but I will try to remember that word.
Well, help your friend. Somebody's child is going to take it. So say, look, I got a word for you. Make sure they know this.
I'll start knocking on the doors in the neighborhood. Got it.
I got it. So thanks. All right, Kate, what do you think? What would you like to talk about with
Yeah.
regards to the past and
So I think one thing, I'm going to take a little bit more of a general approach to this as well. As I was also doing some research and looking into notable alum associated with Hopkins, something that struck me, and I actually did not know this. I'm kind of surprised I didn't know this, but Hopkins was the first medical school in the US to admit women when they started admitting anyone, it started admitting men. And so from its beginning, Hopkins started admitting women in 1890s, 90s, I think. Um, and one of the things I find most interesting about that is that it was built into the structure of the medical school. So admitting women, and then also that the admissions requirements were the same for men and women. So there were no differences at all. And the women who actually provided the funding to build the medical school or help contribute some of the funding to let this happen, they insisted that they should have the same requirements. There were the men in charge of the medical school and the university. had flirted with the idea of admitting women, but then they had backed away from it and didn't think it was necessarily a good idea at the time. And they decided to agree with Harvard and to not admit women. But these women insisted on it. And so one of the things I find really interesting about this and how it translates or, connects with what we're talking about today is that ethics, inclusion, accountability, if these things are just aspirational, they're really hard to make work. You can talk about them, but to really make them work, they need to be part of the system that you're building. Um, and so these are the kinds of things that when I've been, using AI tools and helping my clients use AI tools, is that it's as much about the systems and the governance and the incentives and the decision rights as it is about the technology itself. And so this is just a connection, I think, with Hopkins and Hopkins over the 150 years, is that these kinds of decisions that were made, sometimes, a little happen, things happen a little more quickly than others, but these are the kinds of things that helped Hopkins become the institution it is today. And these are the things that will help Hopkins continue to be a leader and to continue to help develop the leaders who are going to be building and evolving these technologies in the future.
Wow, it's fantastic. And as we listen to the answers that you guys have each given, and we look across, again, it's about the people. So, Bill, I think I'm going to be saying that most of this meeting. And you look at the people and the metal of those people and the giving and the humanity is the word I'm looking for of the people. I think we see a common thread, right? It's yeah, it's wonderful, right? Oh, and this is just over time, right? Just over time. And I'm sure if we talked about this for 2 hours with if another group, not as fantabulous as this one, but another group talked about it, they would come up with another set of folks with just as equally as we have. And so I think that's fantastic. And I think so I'm going to talk about a past figure that is actually pretty close to me. So I'm fortunate, and well, our family is fortunate in the sense that we have four PhDs in our family in science and engineering. And the very first one was my cousin, Hiawatha Watkins, who got his PhD from Hopkins in 1980. And that was amazing to me. Because when you think about, growing up in and around Baltimore and all that, and he's like, look, this is what I'm gonna do. And he did it. And it's such an inspiration. And the funny thing, the honest thing is it wasn't I was you have a conversation with your dad. I'm having a conversation with my dad, and we're talking, and he was like, well, yeah, they called him High. He said, High gave a lecture at MIT one time when I was at, so my dad graduated chemical engineering from MIT in the 60s, and he was talking about when after High had finished, one of the things he did was give a talk, and so he went there to see it. And I was like, "Wait, what? Right? What are you talking about?" And I was like, What kind of family secret stuff is this that we shouldn't have?" And so he's like, "Oh yeah," and we come from a pretty humble family. I think most of us do. Like we don't really talk about ourselves much, but I'm like, man, we need to talk about that because that's important. And so when I think about Hopkins personally, it has uh that kind of emotion for me, right? Because I said that my cousin he did that, right? And then I was next, and I have my PhD in electrical engineering, and I went Hopkins undergrad proudly. And then my brother has a PhD in electrical engineering, and then my son just this August finished his PhD in computational media, which is in the School of Engineering. So that's four. But honestly, it really all started with my cousin. And I think that's amazing. And I do have his dissertation. So I've got it, and I've got mine and my son's, and I'm working on my brother because he's slow. Because I want to keep them all together on the bookshelf, and not keep it a secret. So honestly, that's why sometimes, believe it or not, that's why I have like doctor in my at the front of my name and a number of these things because it's an ode to our family because I think it's important for people to know, right? And so anyway, that's how it is. That's sort of my story on that, and like I said, this has a very personal connection for me. All right, so enough of that. Now let's talk about now we talked about the past. So now we're going to talk a little bit about current and future, sort of where we are now and then if we can think about a little bit sort of what is Hopkins sort of we can tie this in as we talk a little bit. So what's Hopkins' responsibility as well? Sort of what does Hopkins do, right? Current, future, so what that is. So I want to talk a little bit about that. Um, so, we can talk, let's talk a little bit about the current state of digital transformation, right? So here I'm going to start with you, Alex.
Okay.
What's your thoughts on just the state of digital transformation where we are?
All right. Well, I got to say, first of all, I feel like I'm standing at the plate, let's say Camden Yards, and there's a melon coming right down the pipe, a big fat one. Got to take a swing at it first. Kate started with the diversity thing, and then you jumped into it. I got to take a swing at that because that's the root of innovation. So I teach this stuff, I advocate this stuff a lot. It's about diversity of thought,
Mm,
right? And we use a lot of these other indicators, gender, race, orientation, skin color, as an analog for achieving diversity of thought. And if you look at the stuff about 150 years ago, an economist, I'm pretty sure he's not a Hopkins grad, um, studied innovation and found out it was all about diversity of thought.
mhm,
So by having that diversity of thought, that is what really drives the innovation and makes better decision making, right? So we can't lose the idea that these other things are just kind of an analog for what we're really looking for is the diversity of thought. And that's incredibly important. And Thomas Edison, who until fairly recently held the most patents in the US, that was one of his major themes. So if you look at his research facility, his labs, he had a lot of diversity in what he did, even for the time in the 1800s. And that's something we can't lose because that's what it's about. And when you look at how so I've spent a career leveraging emerging technology to generate value, whether it's making people's lives better or business value, usually measured in revenue, or kind of like we were talking before about philanthropy. It's really about how do we take those ideas and craft them into something new. And I think that we can't lose that. A lot of times it's not lost, but it's not spoken about. Maybe we should spend more time focusing on the diversity of thought and the importance to the whole innovation thing, the whole digital transformation thing, and also how it just raises society instead of focusing on the mechanics. Maybe we need to do that. Um, I mean, there's a lot here in terms of the state. We are we are churning out technology faster and faster. And the reason I focus on technology is if you look at what really drives innovation and productivity, it's always technology. Whether it be when we were in the caves, at one point, the person who could create fire was probably the most valuable person in the cave, right? Now we don't even think about it, you know? So what we're seeing with AI is just the next technology. We're transferring work from the human to the machine so the human can focus on the more strategic activities. And that's another thought that we tend to forget about. Yes, there's going to be disruption. There's going to be loss in jobs, but that's temporary. If you look back at the couple hundred years we've been solving this, at the time of the American Revolution, there was something like 10 million people in the United States, right? Now we have 335 million. We are obviously creating technology, we're creating machines, but we're creating jobs. It's just those transition periods can be a little rough, especially when you're the one disrupted.
Mm.
I think we shouldn't lose those points because the transition can be rough. And Bill probably knows this in spades. If you look at the numbers, only 1 in 20 people accepts change. The rest have to be convinced or watch the group going, or eventually you got folks all the way at the end. You either got to grab them by the neck and drag them kicking or screaming, or encourage them to go do something else. It's just the nature of the beast. What we're going through now is just evolving faster and on a larger scale, affecting more people at once, as opposed to pockets.
So I like that. So you're saying, look, we've gone through this period analogous to this, and jobs are still going to be created. And one of the last things you just said was it's happening a lot faster, right? So
Oh
we're in
yeah.
this transition. So, I mean, people do talk about or feel like, digital transformation, AI, something is taking people, it will be taking people's jobs away. But there's some jobs we just, you know, some jobs use the right tools, they make a job easier, you can get it done quicker, and then you got time to do other things. So I'm of the belief that it's not going to take away, it might take away a particular job, but not the purpose, right? We still have purpose.
The
There's still
work
things
doesn't
to
go
do.
away.
That's right.
The work doesn't go away. It changes.
That's right. Very good. All right, F, what do you think?
All right. Well, first off, just going back to something that was brought up a few minutes back, we talked about the university is going through its 150th, about to have its 150th birthday, I think actually in 19 days. I think February 22nd, 2026 is officially Hopkins' 150th birthday. That was it. February 22nd was usually commemoration day. I think that when I was a senior in 1990, then President of the United States, Bush 41, came and spoke to at the university then when I was a senior on February 22nd, 1990. But yeah, Hopkins, I think, actually intentionally chose that birthday. They knew about the era. They knew that they had the money from Johns Hopkins, the philanthropist coming in. But I think they chose February 22nd, 1876 intentionally because that was America's 100th birthday year, and February 22nd was George Washington's birthday. So that date was very, very intentional, and 19 days from now will be our 150th birthday. Okay, where are we currently with AI? Good question. And I'll try to give you as quick an answer as I can. Yeah, as Alex said, there's a lot coming out, a lot of technology there. I think there's a lot of debate whether we're having more signal than noise or more noise than signal. Where I see it is that AI can be and often is good for automating algorithmic based tasks that are straightforward and humans dislike doing. It can often, from what I see, struggle with things that are outside of an algorithm. That's when you get things that people call either hallucinating or people are calling them what, AI slop. I'll share two articles and one tweet, if we, well, whatever you call them, that are on X now. I guess they're not tweets anymore. That basically, for me, are a good summary of where we are. Example of good AI, I'm going to share something from Johns Hopkins Magazine. I believe it's the latest issue. They had an article about how AI streamlined an editing and uploading process, which allowed physicians and nurses to deliver better and more empathetic care. I mean, that's good AI. It basically automated an algorithmic process, and it allowed the physicians and nurses to focus on, as Out said, what they like doing and what they do best, basically being human. An example of less good AI, there was a Wall Street Journal article, I believe just in the past few weeks, that reports a major disconnect between CEOs and workers about whether AI is saving them time and increasing efficiency. The CEOs are saying it works. And the workers profiled in this Wall Street Journal story are not so sure. They 2/3 of non-management staffers are saying that they save less than 2 hours a week or no time at all through AI. And many of them are feeling very overwhelmed by AI. Basically, that's an example of potentially more noise than signal if you're not careful. And what I'll call, yeah, so good AI, less good AI, this tweet or whatever you call on X now, bizarre, frustrating AI, I'm going to call it. Somebody who I like to follow is a woman named Christina Farr. People might know who she is. She's a thought leader on healthcare and healthcare management nowadays, and the finances of healthcare. And she wrote this made me laugh. I think this was yesterday she posted this. She, to her something like 90,000 followers, she wrote, "There is something very of the moment where an AI bot is messaging me on LinkedIn requesting $150,000 for a service to help me get into Stanford undergraduate just 2 years shy of my 40th birthday." And so, yeah, AI does a lot of things like that. It can basically say, here is a service that's great for you. It costs $150,000 that helps you get into the school of your choice, even though you're somebody who graduated college 18 years ago. Maybe that's an example of hallucinating or AI slop, or maybe both. So I think that's kind of where we are right now. AI can do some great things. AI will continue to do great things. But you know what? There's always going to be some noise out of that. And I think it's going to take humans. I mean, I'll maybe say a little bit later on. I think that humans are going to be the ones that are going to constantly have to manage to make sure that the signal to noise ratio is high.
Oh man, I agree with that. Well, I mean, it's only $150,000 after you can get another degree. What are you talking about?
You
And
can
you'll get
tweet that,
help. What
tweet
do you
that back
mean?
to Christina Farr. I mean, I think she'll probably appreciate that.
Hey, aren't we like talking about lifetime learning here?
That's right.
Right?
We're all lifetime learners. I don't know
So
what you're saying.
I think you should call her and say, hey, I'll tell you what, give me 10 grand, I'll get you into Hopkins.
I think that, yeah, I know where I'm from, but I think her point was is that is probably what the bot would probably be saying. That is probably what the bot's process there is, that you can always learn, but at the same time, a human would know this is not the best target for that, even though the bot is saying, "Hey, who wouldn't want this?"
But even before AI came out, right? So I teach this stuff. I teach AI governance. I don't teach for Hopkins, but would love to. So if anybody in the office, in the audience
Knows
knows of a
anybody?
position, let me know. Um, Something to remember. People can still do stupid stuff with technology. Humans do that all the time. Doesn't mean it's the problem with the technology. It's what you do with it, right? So there's something very important there. I also have to go back to one other thing, and we learned this from Star Trek, right?
There
So
you
it has
go.
to be true. It has to be true if it's on Star Trek. The word sabotage comes to us because in Japan, when they were automating manual processes with machines, the workers took their shoes called sabots and threw them into the machines to break them. That's where we get the word sabotage. Now, the other major thing we lost from Star Trek is never wear a red shirt on the landing party.
Ever.
Never, never. And you notice none of
Don't even accept the red shirt. I do not need a red shirt. And red's my favorite color, but I would not wear one, just for the record.
don't do it. Just don't
Don't
do
do it.
it. And
So,
I go
go ahead.
back to the just pre-AI, before malicious actors were not using the tools like we see them doing today. I don't know about you, but I got spams about magical cures to diseases I didn't know I had, long lost relatives that were going to send me millions if I send them tens of thousands of dollars first, and women I never met who wanted to have my baby,
Mm.
right? That was being done by humans. So humans do things like that too. The machines just do them faster and cheaper.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So because we're taping this, I'm not going to ask you how many kids you have. I'm just going to ignore that you said that. But because we're friends, I'm not going to put you out there, Alex. We're
I
friends.
have dogs.
But look, cool. All right, and so I'm going to go to Kate. Kate, I'm interested in your thoughts on this. But just before you answer, Cindy asked us a good question. Cindy, I'm going to get to your question. I just want to say for folks that are listening, if you have a question, ask your question and I'll feed it in. We'll get to it. But so Cindy, so we're gonna get your question in here. So go ahead, Kate. What do you think?
Yeah, so I think the current state, I'll just bring it back to like my work specifically. So I've worked mostly in digital media and technology for my career. And recently I've picked up some other clients too, like one is in the services business. And I was fascinated. I started working with them recently. They don't use AI. It's probably like the first sizable client I've had who doesn't use it. Now they will say, well, we use it. If somebody asks us, if investors ask us, we say we use it because they do use it in terms of like marketing automation tools and things like that. But they're not using AI to improve processes or anything like that, and or in their daily work, at least not formally as an organization. And I think this is a really interesting example to me is because this is a little bit representative of where we are today, where the tools are pretty good, but they are introducing so much noise that in order to figure out how to make them efficient and effective and to really help advance and to find those gains that you need in terms of like, I'm talking about my basic work now in business, is that it takes a lot of work. It takes a large amount of investment in time and effort and money to figure out how to make these tools work. And so a lot of times when organizations say, oh, we're laying off people because of AI, or we are, oh, yes, we're using AI, and the people, the employees in the background are grumbling, oh, it's not really helping. Well, leadership feels compelled to justify their investments that may or may not be paying off yet, but they're betting that long term it will, and likely it can. But again, we're in this point where it's moving so fast, and AI can sound so smart. But when you open it up a little bit, sometimes it's really not as efficient and as effective as where it needs to be. So we're in this state now where we're getting some gains and advances. And I mean, Hopkins is seeing tremendous success with really human-centered, patient-centered AI developments, tools that they're building to help advance understanding of, the things that impact our lives, our health and our well-being, and then how to help people, in lots of ways. Um, so we have these great advancements, but there's also this like, oh, there's a lot of muck in there as well. And so I feel like that's where we're in this kind of early stage of just trying to figure out how do we separate the wheat from the chaff and how do we figure out who's doing it more efficiently and how can we do this without it being a whole new, like, years long process to figure out. So that's my scientific assessment of where we are.
Thanks. Kate, you made me think. So again, I'm here in Senegal, and we are looking at, a lot of research trying to look at how we can collaborate better with, folks in other countries here in Africa. And there's some work I heard about today called responsible AI, and it's really looking down at because people can get hurt. So how are we tracking through all of that, right? And who's responsible and how can we stop it? And that sort of hits to some of what you're talking about because
Yeah.
we're sort of in this muck. And I think that might be one of the ways to get out of the muck is by one, um, looking at what some of the bad, well, we know what some of the bad effects are. And so how do we stop that from getting worse? And then how do we begin to clean up? And I think that responsible AI, I personally think that's going to be something that's going to help us or something like it, right? Names change, but you're right on point, I think, with your assessment. So over to you, Bill. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll pick up right where you left off. I feel, based on where we're at currently, I feel like it's everybody's responsibility to understand the impact of this technology. So, responsible AI, yes, but everybody's responsible for it. There's two things that come to mind. One is a quote that Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, said to us years ago, which is these technologies will teach us more about our humanity than any other technology in our generation. And I believe that's true for all the reasons we've talked about, because no matter what we're seeing come across headlines or our screens, it does leave us with questions about what is our humanity and what is the human fingerprint or heart print or soul print or whatever you want to call it. What is that print that you're leaving on the world? The second thing I think I've struggled with is something that I ended up predicting about 2 years ago at the end of an interview. Somebody was asking me about the opportunity that I have to roll these things out at scale and design chatbots and empower workforces to achieve some of these efficiencies. And they asked me, what do you think is the future? And I said at the end of the interview, I think the future is where agents will be talking to agents, doing a lot of the work, and we will have to check their work and in many cases pull the leash back. If anyone's read the articles from this week or last week about something called Moltbook, if you haven't, I encourage you to look at it. It's quite scary and unnerving. Essentially, what has happened is they have created a social media network for agents. Now, agents are, again, non-human entities. These are AI-powered agents that are doing work. And they've created this social media network, which I believe exists on one man's Mac Mini somewhere in the world. He's running it locally. And this social media network of agents have started to create fiefdoms and networks and subnetworks. And they're talking to each other and they're doxing each other and they're creating synthetic drugs. And then they're creating synthetic drug markets. Now, again, I'm saying that none of this is real. This is all happening in this sort of social media agentic work. But within days, this has turned into a very subversive subculture of non-human entities trying to one up and outdo and in some cases dox each other. This is all running off one Mac Mini. So imagine what would happen if this power were put out in the world. I encourage people to read about it because I'm walking in my hallways and people are saying, is this true? This can't be true. In some ways, we're closer to the storylines of Terminator 2 than people realize. And I think it's imperative, especially as those of us who have the access and the opportunity to sit at tables and have conversations, it's imperative that we take that obligation and that responsibility on. One last thing I'll leave you with. I just did a quick search. At OpenAI, there are over 60 people that work there that have some association to Johns Hopkins University. At Anthropic, there are 41 people that have some association to Johns Hopkins University. There are 100 people at both of those organizations, which are driving some of the headlines, that have a connection to Hopkins. I encourage those people, I imagine those people are having very critical conversations inside those companies, which are shaping our companies, shaping our culture, and shaping our touch points. I'm on that drumbeat because, again, it comes back to responsibility, accountability, and humanity.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, I'm gonna stay with you for a second, Bill. So we're gonna get to Cindy's question. So Cindy says, "What's a technology that's not?" And she bolded it, capitalized it, and put asterisks around it. That's not AI that you think is going to shape the future. Is it energy, space, biotech, something else? And do you know if Hopkins is investing in that as well? So I'm gonna start with you, and then
Sure.
we're gonna take it with open it up to the group.
Yeah, I mean, I think biotech is probably one that is squarely in the intersection of Johns Hopkins. I think we've always been involved in biotech. I will say that pretty much anything you listed in there, Cindy, it's going to have an adjacent, probably, aspect of it that is going to be AI. But at the heart of these problems we're trying to solve, you're right. When it comes to humanity, when it comes to biotech, when it comes to curing diseases, when it comes to helping people solve problems, it doesn't always have to be what's the AI on it, right? I mean, we joke about this now. You can go to a store and see an AI powered toothbrush. Is that really what you need? Is that really going to help your hygiene? Probably not. Some people would say yes, I want that, right? I wear an Aura ring, right? For those of you that have Whoop or Aura ring, right? I would consider this kind of an extension now of a little bit of the biotech. It told me 2 weeks ago that I was sick before I knew I was sick. Why? Because it's able to look at that variance and see that my body temperature spiked before I even knew it did. And sure enough, I got the flu 2 days later. So it's fascinating to me to know that there's these extensions of things that can make us healthier, but there's also probably AI in the dashboard that's running some of those things and looking at that data. So to me, it is a combination thereof. And I think when you think about space exploration, biotech, energy, quantum, these are all things that stand on their own. And I do think there's an adjacent when you take these technologies, we're playing with it. That's my thinking there, Charles.
I like it. And as you were pointing out to, and it actually addressed her question exactly, it's helped to shape the future. When you look at biotech, that's shaping the future. And I agree with that on a number of levels. So Alex, what do you think?
Well, Bill already mentioned biotech. I wrote down four things: robotics, gene therapy, which is kind of biotech, right?
Mm,
Blockchain and quantum computing, right?
wow.
We've got a lot of connections to all of that. A little bit of trivia. So I did my master's in 95, right? That's in the bio. While I was going through my master's, that's when I first learned about quantum computing. So Hopkins has been doing work in that space for a very long time. I'm not even sure when Hopkins got into robotics, but I would guess it's probably close to 100 years. Very rudimentary robotics, especially because of the work they've done with the military and government. And then, uh, blockchain, a lot of the math behind it, I'm sure, has contributions from Hopkins, and I know there's articles and research that Hopkins has put out in that space. So there's definitely a lot there. I think the interesting thing is when you're a research university, you kind of start getting the ball rolling, right? And then going back to where we were a minute ago, it's when the people start playing with this stuff, and it's kind of like learning to ski. If you're not falling, you're not learning. And that's
Mhm.
what a lot of happens with this stuff, right? You find out something, you try it, there's this FUD, there's all this stuff going on, and that's when you start getting the breakthroughs and you get the ideas. It's like the internet, right? There was a joke circa 2000. People would say the advantages of the internet are showing up everywhere except the numbers, which is exactly what we're seeing now. Think about what the pandemic would have been like if we did not have the internet, right? Nobody sits there and goes, "Oh, I'm glad we had the internet. It helped me get through the pandemic. I could work from home." Nobody thinks about it that way, but think about all the work and all the discovery, all the investment, all the trials, all the errors that had to happen to get us to that point. Thomas Edison, there's thing that always said that he tried 1,500 different filaments. The Edison project has now gone through his notes and found it's more like 2,700 times. What if he stopped at 10? Right? So a lot of this work that goes on, you just
Mm,
build and build
mm.
and build. And one last one, and because I can ramble on this stuff for quite some time. Uh, Sir Isaac Newton, before he was a sir, said that he could see so far because he stood on the shoulders of others. When I was at APL, there was a mural of all these famous people. And that was one of the quotes that they had there. And I always remembered that walking the halls of APL because it hits you every day. And I think that's one of the reasons why Hopkins has been such a contributor in so many different ways and in a humble way.
Mhm.
Hopkins doesn't stand up and go, "You couldn't have done that without me." Kind of going back to what you were talking about, it's kind of like, you know, four PhDs in your family. Other than the holidays, what do? You sit there and go, doctor, doctor, doctor. Um,
Right.
there's a humility to this, and I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, I agree with you. So, Kate, what's your thoughts?
So, I mean, I don't know that there's any one technology that's kind of jumping out at me. There are lots of things that we've been working on, but I think one of the things that always sticks with me about Hopkins is the cross disciplinary nature of how the research is conducted and then how that can impact, us in our daily lives. And then, if we also think about, the role of Hopkins in lots of space exploration tools and missions, among other things. Space is just currently in my mind. I have Hubble telescope is like looms large from when I was an undergrad at Hopkins. That was a big one. I know I'm dating myself, Alex. You don't need to say anything. I thought you were.
I giggled for a different reason
Oh, okay.
because in one of my classes, when everything was going on with Hubble, they threw out something like, "How would you fix it?"
Mhm.
And I always remember because without missing a beat, somebody suggested, "Why don't we just make a large pair of glasses and fly them up?" So
The lenses, yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a lot. In Hopkins, I mean, so I think the cross-disciplinary nature um, of how technologies are developed and then how research is conducted. Now, I also understand that at Hopkins, there's a desire and an initiative actually to help bring down more of those barriers between departments. And so, as that gets more and more institutionalized, I think we'll see even greater things. But um, so I think, just essentially what I'm trying to say is that it's almost like going back to the people thing. We
Yeah.
have the technologies. We could talk about AI all day. We could talk about all kinds of digital technologies. We can talk about, computational modeling. We can talk about what's happening in AI-driven health. Um, but really, what the way to develop technologies and tools and systems that impact people at scale is through this cross-disciplinary work that Hopkins really has done pretty well at and wants to continue to do even better with. So,
Very
yeah.
good. Very good. I think, and when I think about this, and please, again, if you have questions, please plop them in the chat so we can get to them. But I think a couple things when I think about AI. I think that so first off, AI is a tool, right? So it's not the thing, it's just the tool, right? So it's enabling in some cases. But the other thing I think about is if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
so I think that so when I think about this is I think so certainly AI has a lot of hype around it and some of it certainly well warranted. But I don't but it's we have a lot of problems to look at. And I think, Cindy, that's the heart of your question. And so part of what I think about, actually in about 3 weeks, I'll be participating in a meeting that we've been putting together where we're going to talk to about 40 experts. One of them, uh, Dr. Andreu from Hopkins will participate where we're talking about wave computing. And we're going to be looking at things like how do you operate in the optical space? How do you operate in the terahertz region? So, what are those kind of things? And those are real physics questions that have to be asked and answered, and sort of what are the limitations, and so it's going to be more questions coming out of that than answers, because but we've got to ask the right questions. But I personally think things like wave computing, optics, those kind of things, where we're really pressing our knowledge of physics and what's possible. I think that's going to be the thing that is going to really help shape the future. And so F, I want to come to you a little bit, and you can certainly do take your shot at answering Cindy's question. But the other thing I want to talk to you about a little bit, I want to go back because I want to make sure that you say this. So I want to go back to sort of what you, so a person in the past, and you have some thoughts about a figure in the past that I'd like for you to share.
So this is an interesting segue because I thought that we talk about a new technology that doesn't involve AI. I remember I read that question and I said, AI is going to be in there somewhere. But you know what Hopkins is investing in that I think is very important and probably more important than ever? Hopkins is doing a lot more investing in the arts. We talk about Hopkins, we talk about being the first research university and all we've done in science and medicine and technology and all space exploration. All that is true. We tend to forget how much Hopkins has done for the arts and the humanities. Top level writing seminars department that's produced many great writers. We have the Baltimore Museum of Art on our campus, and one of my biggest regrets is I did not take advantage of that enough. The Peabody School of Music, and I really think that investing in that is going to be part of what makes us human. One of the things that I brought up as really an example of what AI can and can't do. And I'm going to get to the person that you want me to bring up in a second. Is that you think about what AI can do if you were to say to AI, give me a take this Sabrina Carpenter song and have it sung as if it was sung by Bob Dylan, it could probably do a very good job of putting Bob Dylan's voice. And you'd say, wow, that's exactly what Bob Dylan would sound like. But I guarantee you this, were Bob Dylan to really cover the Sabrina Carpenter song, it would sound much different. So that's really what AI can. AI can do a good job of simulating, maybe in our head, but it can't actually replicate the real thing. And one person that we talked about, and when we were brainstorming this, I mentioned that somebody, not necessarily Hopkins related, but somebody from the world of art that I feel strong connection to is Judy Garland. Why? We share a birthday. She is likely the most famous person in the world ever with a June 10th birthday. And I think it was about 5, 6 years ago, Hopkins magazine had a thing about 4 people you could have dinner with. She was one of the people I would love to have dinner with. She also passed away 12 days after I was born. So she passed away on June 22nd, 1969. June 10th, 1969, which is the day I was born. That was her last birthday, her 47th birthday. Um, and The Wizard of Oz is something, it's always been a fable. It's been a great allegory for many things. I think there's something there that really to me hits even harder now. A friend of mine, somebody who I really look up to. I'm very privileged to know a guy named Mike Bechtel, who was the chief futurist at Deloitte. He actually attended a Hopkins innovation event on my recommendation. He's not a Hopkins alum, but I said, "Here's an event that I think that you'd enjoy going to," and he went on my recommendation. I took that as a great honor. He notes that there are 3 human attributes that are key in this era: ingenuity, being able to ask the great question. Machines know the answers, but asking the great question. He also says empathy, leading with need and serving others. And he finally says initiative, getting busy without needing to be asked. Those are 3 things that are going to be very important in this area: ingenuity, empathy, initiative for humans. And those align so linearly with the scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the lion. The Scarecrow is about ingenuity. The Tin Man's about empathy or searching for empathy. He's looking for his heart. And the Lion's really about initiative and the courage to have initiative. So I think that Judy Garland really keeps popping back into what is important. and what will be important and that narrative of the Wizard of Oz. And you know what? The arts may not be technology, but I would argue that they are part of innovation and they are more important than ever. And kudos to Hopkins for continuing to invest in them and continuing to take them to another level.
Only here can you hear that the Scarecrow is about ingenuity, the Tin Man is about empathy, and the Lion is about intuition. Did I get that right?
Initiative. Well, I mean,
Initiative.
if people disagree with that, push back. But I would say, I mean, that's the Scarecrow. He was about always. I mean, that's part of the thing about the Wizard of Oz too. These are characters that are constantly looking for things they already had. The Scarecrow wanted a brain, but it turns out if you watch him, he's the smartest of all of them. The Lion is the one that saves Dorothy. The Tin Man is just a very empathetic person, and Dorothy wants to go home, and it turns out she always was home, but she never realized it. That's really what's bad. That's that, and I think that's it's always been an important story. I think it's more important than ever now.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Love
I
it.
also the thing you had mentioned too about being able to ask a question. Oh my God, so important. I mean, that statement was like, um, really, it's so important because what we get back from technology is only as good as what we put into it, right? And so if we're not asking the right questions, we're not going to get the right answers back. And I would also argue that arts are very much, well, maybe they're not technically always part of technology, but they have a role to play because it also is about subjectivity and judgment. And these are things that we do need to, uh, it's part of like our role as humans, right? Especially in this age of machines, where we can learn from the arts or like continue to invest in the arts and develop these parts of ourselves that are needed in order to get more out of the tools as well, right? In order to be able to ask questions, we need to be able to, think subjectively and think critically and be able to weigh whether an answer is good or not good. Is it appropriate or not appropriate? And so these are things that, where the arts, I think, very much do have a role to play in helping us.
Just one quick thing. I want to give the shout out to name it Mike Bechtel, who's the one who basically started that. And I think it was our 2022 event. He was at Deloitte that time, and I shared with him that we were talking about innovation with some Hopkins alums. He's not a Hopkins alum, and he said he was going to have his team. His team was supposed to have that weekly meeting. His team at Deloitte, and he said their meeting was going to be they were going to come on and sit in on our event, our conversation that we had in 2022. So it's great to be able to cross promote him here. And what he said, his point was really, I think, on subject for where we are right now.
So I will say that Barbara left a good quote in the chat from Julie Garland, which is always be a first-rate version of yourself instead of a second-rate version of someone else. Absolutely beautiful. Thanks, Barbara, for that. And um, and I will say this, I'm gonna hit the arts, and Alex, I'm gonna come to you. That so first off, being here, we talked about this tonight. We talked about how the arts bring people together because there's a lot of folks who hadn't been to Africa before. There are people who've been to Africa but never been to Senegal. And and we're here talking, tech and food science and all kinds of things. But it's the arts that just brought us so much joy being here. Just the artwork, the sculpture that's behind me, like all that. It's beautiful. So I think the arts are certainly there. And now take a 30-second thing. This past Christmas, what we decided to do was go out, and so we went to the Maryland Institute of Art, which is, right down from Hopkins. And we bought Christmas gifts from the young artists there. They have an art show, and those are the students. And when you hear, when you hear the students talk about their work and how they did things and what they thought about and all that, I didn't have enough money to spend because I just wanted to buy everything from every one of them. because it was beautiful just how they thought about things. Oh, it was beautiful. So I think so Cindy, thanks for your question because you see you've helped shape this part of our conversation because I think it's beautiful. So Alex, I want to come to you a little bit and we're gonna talk a little bit about future and sort of what do you see or who do you see as a leader sort of in the areas as we go forward, as Hopkins goes forward, and we talk about man and machine, what are your thoughts on what the future looks like and maybe that and maybe who do you think could be a leader or not? Like what are your thoughts on that?
That's a very large question, right? And there's a lot of depth to that. The first thing that comes to mind is, let's take on the whole thing about how technology can be a bad thing.
Mm,
I think one of the advantages we have, and we've discussed this in other things that this group has done, there's been a lot of movies about the bad things that happen with technology when it goes wrong. I like to believe that we're smart enough to treat those as cautionary tales.
mm,
And we are actively engaging around, we talked about responsible use of AI, responsible use of technology. When the internet was first starting to take off, that was not discussed. Everything about responsible use, we're still struggling with it today in things like social media, right? We never got in front of it, but we are getting in front of it a lot faster than we ever have before when it comes to technology. Now, are we perfect? No. Are there a lot of fits and starts? No. No, a lot of fits and starts? Yes. I'd rather live in a George Jetson world or a Star Wars world where the humans and the machines stick together and they work together. I'm not into the dystopic world or like in 2001 Space Odyssey when Hal starts killing off the astronauts. I don't want to live in that world. So I'm going to do everything I can to ensure that world does not happen. And I think a lot of people in this field are thinking about that enough that we're going to give it a good shot at avoiding it. Now, look at the numbers. This Earth is roughly 12 billion years old, right? We haven't even come close to how long the dinosaurs were out. We're taking care of it, right?
mm,
What's coming next? Maybe the next evolution for our planet is machines, or a combination of machines and humans living together, or some form of, kind of merged entity. I don't know, but I really do believe that because of all the negative history and all the movies and all the hype and all that's out there, we are being more thoughtful about this than we ever have before. Yeah. So at least we have a shot. The genie's out of the bottle. It's not going back in the bottle. Let's do good things.
I'm with you. Look, the Enterprise works. Scotty's down there. He's getting help with the AI computer. And the Enterprise is working. Man is going forth and discovering and helping. So honestly, I'm with you on that. Um, so Bill, what are
Yeah.
your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I want to remind people that the way that this all sort of burst into our collective consciousness was when this technology was first demonstrated with one of the world's most, prolific CEOs, Satya Nadella. He took AI and he said, I'm going to take a poem from Rumi, a Persian mystic, and I'm going to put it in this technology and I'm going to ask it to translate it into a very unique dialect from India. And if it can do that well, it has my attention. So I believe the future is going to be a poet laureate or a composer or a filmmaker or an artist or a dancer. Somebody like you said, right? There's this aspect of the humanity that comes through things that are uniquely and divinely human and cannot be replicated. I think the future lies there. And I think those are the people that are going to, in many ways, hold us back from the edge, the cliff, if you will, but also take us into a new potential atmosphere of creativity, possibility, and humanity. I don't know who that person is. Maybe they'll come from Hopkins.
Come from the great arts and humanities piece, which, like I did not spend enough time there. I am with you on that. I took writing sims, but it was so many other classes I could have taken. But that's but water under the bridge at this point. So, Kate, what are your thoughts?
So I don't know if I'm quite as optimistic as Alex, but I do believe that governance and responsible use are things that we need to be talking about a lot more, and really need to be done. And the reason why I'm not as optimistic is because we're already seeing, at least with the LLMs, the popular LLMs, that there's already a little bit of a recycling of answers, and you can come up with stuff because the models are also limited by what goes into them. And then the people developing the models, it's really highly concentrated, right, among a handful of big players now. And so, I mean, you never know who's building something in their garage and what's going to be the next future iteration of it. But I do have a lot of concern about whether or not we are on the path to developing the constraints. I don't know if constraints is the right word, but the pieces of the models that are needed in order to kind of hold us back from not only the machines taking over, but from us losing what makes us human. Because if we're all getting, doing the easy work, getting our information from AI, we're using it to help draft our questions, we're using it to help write the responses, then judgment is starting to become less important over time. And we're kind of modeling ourselves out of that. And so, and I think that's like an extreme example, of course, but the idea is that we do need to be much more mindful and much more careful, I think, about how we're using it, but not just as individuals, but at the organization level, like who's actually developing these things and why should we trust them?
Let me throw in a couple of thoughts. And obviously, Kate, I'm going to respect your opinion. But to paraphrase Nietzsche, who was actually paraphrasing a Zoroastrian philosopher, I can only believe in a God who dances. I would rather be optimistic and shoot for that goal than anything else.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's great. I think being optimistic, oh, sorry, being optimistic is really helpful and important that we have, and that it's a way to help keep this as part of the conversation. And yeah, I mean, I think ultimately we will retain our humanness and that we will coexist with machines, all kinds of machines that are enabled by AI, which is again a piece of
Yeah,
the broader technology uh, field. But yeah, I have some concerns. I'm not
we all do.
totally pessimistic, but I do have concerns, and I think that these are things that need to be talked about a lot more. And
We do. And being the guy who teaches AI governance and spends a lot of his time on AI governance, I have to talk my book, right?
oh,
So
I
that's
think you
just,
should. Yes, more people need to talk that
I
book.
need to do that. And I guess there was another thought here going back to when Bill was talking, and actually F2, when when Bill was talking, I was thinking if you think about the people who have changed the world the most, they're folks like Jesus Christ, Muhammad. I mean, we can go down the list. None of them are technologists, right? And when F was talking, no matter how many times we've talked about Judy Garland and the the player she was with and that whole situation, for the first time ever, it occurred to me that Dorothy's character brought these folks together on her journey. If she wasn't trying to get home, she never would have met those, the Scarecrow, the Lion, and the Tin Man, and they never would have gotten what they wanted and what they were seeking and the enlightenment without her going on her journey. I had never thought about that until F was bringing that up tonight.
So, Efrem, what are your thoughts?
Um, I, do you want, I mean, yeah, do you want me to respond to something specific or, I mean, because I have a lot to say to all that. I mean, no, I think that is something that I'm going to say that I'm going to bring up when we wrap up in a couple minutes. I don't want to hit that now. You're asking about where we're headed for the future and being nervous about. I think, and maybe I think I'm going to agree. I'm partially optimistic with Alex, partially because I think that what we call humans in the loop or human glue is just really important. And I think that is going to be essential. I think we need a better term than that. Then I don't really like either of those terms, so those are the two terms that people use right now. One thing I like to say is that one thing AI can't do is speak from the heart because it doesn't have one. And I think, what was it, about 5, 10 minutes ago, I brought up the example of one musical artist covering another, and you can imagine in your head what it sound like, but if they were actually cover them, it would probably sound way different. I think similarly in a role, you take one actor starring in a role. And I've been that before. I'm like, oh my gosh, this person in this role is going to be, I'm familiar with this person. It's going to be so good. And often it is cool. Often it is good. But you know what? When you actually see them in the role, you might know the role well. You might know the actor well. It's still very, very different to seeing them portray it. AI can simulate it. AI might say, yeah, that's exactly what Tom Cruise would be like if they were playing the role of the Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz. But if Tom Cruise actually played the role of the Scarecrow, I guarantee you it would be beyond what you had in your head and beyond what AI would say. What Tom Cruise playing Scarecrow would be, even though it might be a very semi-accurate algorithm of what Tom Cruise playing Scarecrow, and people would be wowed by that. Um, yeah.
Interesting. So, as long as the scarecrow wouldn't skid across the floor in his socks and his skivvies, I think
Let's go for
So
that. See, that's what we can do. Humans can imagine that, and AI can then say, "Oh, we're going to give you a very good simulation of what that would look like." You'd say, "Oh, that's very entertaining." But you know what? If Tom Cruise were to play his role from Risky Business in The Scarecrow, what we imagine it being and what AI would be, it would still be very different with him actually
so
doing it. Then
CJ, when F was talking, the only thing I thought of was Tom Cruise in his underwear flying a jet and singing.
do
Right?
that AI. Can
And
somebody
AI
do that
swap.
AI on ChatGPT and see what the picture comes up? I mean,
well, this is a Bill thing. Bill has some tools at his disposal where he can create some images and graphics, right? Right? Adobe has some really good stuff there. Maybe we should give that to him as homework and see what he comes back with.
Unfortunately, ours would be commercially safe. So because we are citing actors and trademark and copyright, the tools that I have access would not. However, other models would, and I'll just leave that to you guys to do the research on.
Fair enough. That's a very good point, right? So that's an ethical thing right there.
good job, Bill. Very good answer. Because none of us want a cease and desist. Tom Cruise is going to hear about this. I'm predicting, and he's going to contact Hopkins. And like we're like, oh, we don't know what they're talking about. Well, we got you on tape, but that's something else. So we're winding up in our last 5 minutes here. It is still time to get a question in. If you have a question, please, you know, please, now's the time. And then we can start sort of, let's sort of have our sort of statements as we close out sort of on our thoughts on this. So, Bill, well, we got a comment from Stephen who said, I agree about AI simulations of one artist covering another. I've seen so many AI videos on YouTube with one artist's music redone in the style of another artist or other decade. It always sounds interesting at first and has no soul and gets dull after a few minutes of listening. I think we can all agree
Yep.
to that. Seen it? I'm
It's
like,
not.
yep, it's cute, but it's not even puppy cute because puppies stay cute, and that just doesn't stay cute after a while. It's not good. So, all right, we certainly agree with you. I think we all agree with that, Stephen. So thanks for adding that comment to the conversation. So, oh wait, we got a last minute question from Joe. So the Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is home to the Berman Institute of Bioethics, who released a phenomenal podcast called Playing God with a question mark, which told 9 stories of complicated moral situations in medicine. Man, I bet you that's really interesting. I didn't realize that hospitals had entire ethics communities and doctors that do ethics consultations. Do or can or should AI companies have similar ethics positions? Should Hopkins build an institute of technics?
Mm.
I don't know. That might work. What do you guys think?
I vote yes. Um, I think this is key. I think this is really important. I think I kind of agree with Kate on this one. There can never be enough thinking deeply and discerning about this stuff. So I vote yes on it. In fact, if that institute was looking for people, I'd apply.
And they should publish all their work so that it gets built into LLM models.
So there is at least one institute sponsored at another university, so we'll keep them nameless for a moment. And there are several organizations globally that focus on ethics of AI. One of the things that's happened, getting a little geeky for a second, the EU has actually created a set of use cases. Don't even think about it because they infringe too much on potential ethics and could do too much harm. So within Europe, you're not even allowed to try using AI in those use cases.
Yeah, interesting. So we got 2 minutes left. I do want us to give a chance to say your closing thoughts. And then on mine, I'll try to answer the last question from Karan. So we'll start. Looks like you have the mic, Alex. Why don't you start? We'll do you, Kate, Bill, and Efrem.
All right, so this is an ongoing topic, right? We're not going to cover it all tonight, so I'll say a couple of things. First of all, if you enjoyed the video, share it with your friends, like it, you know, tell everybody. Also, I know everybody here is very open to engaging. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn, reach out. We'll keep the dialogue going, right? So just do that. Just do it. The one thought I have right now is this is tremendous potential. I would love to come back in 50 years and look back and see what the world is like. One thought I always go back to is probably for the first time ever, has any species on this planet been in a better position to set their own course than humanity? So that's a charge to everybody. There's a joke out there that says that the reasons the dinosaurs were extinct is because they didn't have a space program. We can build a space program, and we should. We should look at this technology. The genie's out of the bottle. Let's use it responsibly.
All right. Thanks. We may go over by a couple minutes, so if you gotta go, we understand. But go ahead. I think who did I say was next?
Kate. Kate.
Sure. So I think just my closing thought is I am bullish on technology and AI in particular, really around the idea of how we can and its potential to actually improve human outcomes, and not just at the individual levels, but at scale. And I think that's one of the big things to be optimistic about is that there can be a lot of good done when done responsibly.
My parting thought is my first book was a poetry book. I did that on purpose. It was a rebellious act to basically say I'm going to hold on to my humanity in every which way and put something out in the world that cannot be replicated by any of this. And it's my obligation to stay close to this stuff and understand its impact on humanity. I'll do so till the day I die. Reach out if you have any questions.
Beautiful. Eh,
So listen, machines can do a lot. And I still firmly believe, as I think I said earlier, that the dividing line is whether the task is purely algorithm based or not. And that signals how much human in the glue or humans in the loop or human glue is necessary. But one thing I love about our panel, and this is our fourth event we've done together, is that this group of people and the chemistry we have probably couldn't have been assembled neatly by an algorithm. I could have said, give me a diverse group with people, 5 alums from 5 different backgrounds, diversity. Okay, it could have brought people that maybe matched up that. But a group like this that recognized what the chemistry was going to be like, it needed an entity that knew what it was like to be human because it's lived as one. And so, yeah, from all the thousands of living Hopkins alumni, one alumnus recognized that 4 other alumni he knew, but that didn't know each other would get along and have great conversations together. And honestly, I'm probably the least accomplished and the least talented of the 5 of us here. But I know how to put a group of humans together who can have great human conversations, and I'll put myself up against any machine in that regard any day.
So we're going to run a Turing test using you and using a machine to pull a group of Hopkins alum together and see what it comes up with. What would you
They're
do?
not going to get a better group than this group.
I don't
So
think you will, but what if it gives you the same group?
then basically the computer will have basically copied me, and it will validate me of all the thousands. What's the chances that would have been
Exactly.
random?
It
Yeah.
would. I like that. I think we should do this.
All right.
okay, great. So I'm going to close and say thank you, everybody. The thing I will say about this is empathy. AI can't give you empathy. Machines can't give you empathy. Humans can give you empathy. I think we need more empathy in the world today. I think that so thank you for your time. I think that Karan, to answer your question, I think AI is a tool and students should know how to use tools, but they should also know when to use them and when not to use them. That's my 2 cents on that. So thanks everybody. We're a couple minutes over, but just thanks for your time tonight. Great job. Great job, team.